Well, we can now solve the mystery, or at least part of it. Turns out the building is owned by AT&T, and it doesn't have any windows for a reason. It may be the only skyscraper in New York City built to withstand a nuclear blast.
A former FBI agent just made a chilling confession about a building right in the middle of the city, and it's something you'd never believe. Towering above, this place is hidden in plain sight, but what goes on inside is beyond anyone's imagination. But why would they need that level of preparation, and what exactly are they protecting? Tune in as we uncover the real reason behind this fortress that will send chills down your spine. Inside America's hidden tech fortresses. This building is as nondescript as they come. No flashy signs, no big labels, just pure concrete all the way up. And there's a reason for that. The people who built it went to great lengths to make sure you'd never know what's happening inside. They weren't going for inviting. Nope, it's more like you're not even allowed to imagine what's in here. But the truth? This place, along with 7 others scattered across America, is wired right into the US surveillance machine. Thanks to documents leaked about 10 years ago by Edward Snowden, we've come to learn that these buildings are nerve centers for the NSA's Fairview program. They're the silent watchdogs, tapping phone lines and internet cables without anyone knowing. It's like a game of hide and spy, and they're winning. Before we delve into this, it's clear that what's inside these walls is far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. And this revelation won't be the only thing that will shock you. Let's talk specifics. They've got one of these beasts in Atlanta, another in Dallas, and of course 33 Thomas Street in New York, which is the most famous of the bunch. It's been in movies, showing up as this creepy, all-seeing giant. Designed to look like a fortress, it's almost as if the architects leaned in and thought, let's make this look as shady as possible. And people eat it up. Cue the conspiracy theories. But the funny part is that sometimes the conspiracies aren't far off the mark. You take a look at these things, and you just know something fishy is going on. The walls, the lack of windows, the heavy-duty concrete. It screams, stay away, nothing to see here. It is all part of the message they are trying to tell everyone. A message of hermeticism. The idea is to have us guessing what they know, what they discovered. The original idea for these places wasn't actually spying. Back in the 1970s, during the Cold War era, they were just supposed to be ultra-secure hubs for telecommunications, places to keep the phone lines up even if the worst-case scenario happened. Nuclear bombs? No problem, as long as you could still make a call. So they built these hulking structures to keep everything running smoothly, no matter what. Fast forward to today, and they're owned by one company, AT&T, who it turns out is pretty chummy with government agencies. Their collaborative relationship means handing over your data and pretending like it's all cool. Let's get real for a second. These buildings aren't for people. They're built for machines, generators, wires, big diesel tanks, and rooms full of equipment. If you think of them like bunkers for tech, you're on the right track. The one in Chicago, 10 South Canal, has 26 stories of nothing but heavy-duty support, huge columns packed in tight, built to carry serious weight. The building across the street? It has columns every 45 feet, but this one, every 20 feet. You're looking at double the structure to hold up all the gear inside. It's not flashy, but man, it's sturdy. And the New York one, 33 Thomas Street, that's a different kind of monster. Completed in 1974, this thing was designed by John Carl Warnecke, who thought, let's make it look like a fortress. It's got this layered exterior, and inside there's just miles and miles of cables and machinery. It's so densely packed that one historian called it the densest inhabitable object in New York City. Imagine filling every floor with water up to 6 feet, and it's still being totally fine. It's like this place was built to be indestructible. In the 90s, an artist named Stanley Greenberg managed to snap some pictures inside, rows of strange-looking batteries and racks upon racks of equipment. Just enough to make you wonder what else might be hidden in there. There's this weird tension with buildings like 33 Thomas and 10 South Canal. They're part of the city's skyline, right there in plain view. But what happens inside? That's the part we're not supposed to know. And for good reason, apparently. They're wired into this network that's built for spying, collecting data, and doing who knows what with it. It's not like the people working there are keen to let you in on it either. The building might as well have a giant "Keep Out" sign plastered on the front. It's this constant reminder that some things are just off limits, and if you try to dig deeper, well, you're not going to get very far. These buildings stand tall and quiet while the city moves around them, hiding more than meets the eye. The cold concrete guardians of surveillance. The surveillance state, as it's called, isn't even trying to hide anymore. It's all there, big, ugly concrete monoliths sitting in the middle of our cities. They're like the guardians of some twisted, modern, hidden world, making sure the government's interests are always protected. And while we go about our day, commuting, working, living, these places hum along quietly, gathering information, storing data, and making sure they're ready if things ever go sideways. The really bizarre part is that, in a way, we've kind of accepted it. We see these buildings, feel that they're out of place, and then we just shrug and move on. Because what can you do, really? It's the architecture of surveillance. Brutal, cold, and completely unapologetic. There's something almost poetic about it. These buildings, designed to be impregnable, unfriendly, uninviting, sit there, daring you to ask questions. And the more you dig, the less you seem to know. The more questions you ask, the fewer answers you get. It's not a coincidence, it's the point. These places are a statement, a very loud, very clear, "We're watching you." They're relics of a past that isn't quite gone, a time when phone lines were the backbone of communication, and the Cold War paranoia made buildings like this necessary. Today, the methods have evolved. Surveillance isn't tied to a physical building anymore. It's digital, dispersed, and practically invisible. And yet the buildings are still there, like dinosaurs in a world of smartphones. They're relics of the past, but they're also very much a part of the present. As long as they stand, they remind us that the surveillance state isn't going anywhere. These concrete giants are a reminder that there's always something just out of reach, something we're not meant to see. We walk past them every day, but we're not supposed to look too closely. We're meant to feel their presence, not understand it. The scary thing is that, in some ways, these conspiracy theories turned out to be right. The sneaky whispers about spying, hidden rooms, and government ties were closer to the truth than most of us ever thought. And now we know, but what good does knowing do? The buildings are still there, still collecting, still watching. They're not trying to be anything they're not. They're opaque, blunt, and a bit terrifying. There's something unnerving about seeing them up close. It's almost as if they're taunting you. Go ahead, look all you want. You'll never know what's happening inside. And maybe that's the most unsettling part, knowing that some things are just meant to be kept from us, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. Imagine walking through downtown Chicago or New York, seeing these buildings and knowing they're not just empty shells. They're alive with data, traffic from internet providers, phone calls, even emails. They're like black holes, swallowing information without a trace, sending it on to who knows where. And for what purpose? Officially, it's all about national security, making sure threats are detected before they become a problem. But when does security become overreach? When does protecting us cross the line into invading our lives? These are the questions we should be asking ourselves. Yet we've gotten used to the idea that someone is always listening. Take 10 South Canal, for instance. When you look at it, there's nothing welcoming about it. It's 26 stories of hard, unyielding concrete. The windows only start on the top 7 floors, and even then, they're for offices, not people who need to look out and enjoy the view. These machines don't need sunlight. They need a controlled environment, one free from any risk of exposure. Everything about this building is designed to keep you out and to keep what's inside hidden. And then there are those columns spaced every 20 feet, double the density you'd find in a typical building. It's like they were expecting an earthquake, or maybe something even worse. These towering structures aren't just buildings. They're like locked boxes full of hidden things, built with concrete and steel. The fortress built for silent watching. Then there's 33 Thomas Street, the one they call the Telecom Fortress. It's not just any building, it's a symbol. It stands there wrapped in mystery with its granite-faced concrete blocks and tiny vents peeking out from the top. Designed to withstand anything, From natural disasters to nuclear fallout, it's got the kind of specs that make you think it's hiding something big. The structure's core, which holds the cables, ducts, and elevators, is all shoved to one side. This keeps the rest of the building's interior open and flexible, perfect for housing whatever machinery or equipment needs to be in there at any given time. It's like a giant, empty shell, waiting to be filled with whatever the surveillance state needs. Stanley Greenberg's photos from the 90s give us just a tiny glimpse of what's inside, enough to confirm that, yes, this place is packed with strange equipment, backup batteries, and who knows what else. There's something eerie about those images. Rows and rows of racks, each filled with equipment that seems both outdated and somehow futuristic at the same time. It's as if these buildings exist in a kind of time warp, built in the past but constantly updated to serve the needs of the present. And the more we learn about them, the less we really know. Every answer seems to lead to more questions. These surveillance buildings are scattered across the United States, but they're not unique to America. All over the world, countries have their own versions of these secretive hubs, places designed to collect data, keep communication and networks running, and protect the interests of those in power. It's a global phenomenon, one that reflects the interconnected nature of our modern world. The internet, which was supposed to bring us all together, has also made it easier than ever for governments to keep tabs on their citizens. And buildings like these are at the heart of that effort, quietly collecting information, processing it, and sending it on to wherever it needs to go. The Fairview program, which Snowden exposed, is just one piece of the problem. It's about tapping into the physical infrastructure of the internet, the cables and routers that make up the backbone of global communication. Fairview is all about access, about making sure that the government can get its hands on whatever data it needs, whenever it needs it. And buildings like 33 Thomas Street and 10 South Canal are key to that access. They're the points where data is collected, sorted, and sent on its way. They're not glamorous, but they're essential. And they're hidden in plain sight, right there in our cities, blending in with the rest of the urban landscape. But let's be real. There's something unnerving about the fact that we've just accepted all of this. We know these buildings exist, we know what they're for, and yet we don't do anything about it. Maybe it's because we feel powerless, like there's nothing we could do to change things even if we wanted to. Or maybe it's because we've convinced ourselves that this kind of surveillance is necessary, that it's the price we pay for security. But is it really? Or have we just gotten so used to being watched that we don't even notice it anymore? There's a reason these buildings look the way they do. They're not supposed to blend in. They're supposed to stand out, to send a message. They're telling us, we're here and we're watching. And maybe that's the most chilling part of all. Because as much as we might like to pretend otherwise, we know that the surveillance state is real and it's not going away. These buildings are a constant reminder that there's always someone watching, always someone listening. And no matter how much we might want to look away, they're not going to let us. Even though technology has moved beyond the need for massive concrete buildings, these places remain. They're like monuments to an earlier time, a time when surveillance was something you could point to, something that had a physical presence. Today, it's all in the cloud, in the algorithms, in the metadata. But back then, it needed a place, a home. And these buildings were that home. They're relics, but they're also still active, still doing their job, still collecting, storing, and processing data. And as long as they're standing, they're not going to stop. What started as a way to protect us has turned into a system that collects endless data. The towers that gather our data. We live in an age where everything is connected, where every bit of information can be traced, logged, and analyzed. And it's not just the government that's doing it. Private companies are just as involved, if not more so. The lines between government surveillance and corporate data collection have blurred to the point where it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. Atant, the owner of many of these buildings, is a prime example. They're not just providing a service, they're a partner in the surveillance state, and they're not alone. All across the tech industry, companies are working hand in hand with governments to provide access to data, to build the infrastructure that makes surveillance possible. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, to feel like there's nothing we can do to change things. And maybe that's true. Maybe the surveillance state is too big, too powerful, too entrenched to fight. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean we should just accept it without question. Because once we stop questioning, once we stop caring, that's when they really win. These buildings, these surveillance hubs, are designed to be impenetrable, to be beyond our reach. But that doesn't mean we should ignore them. We need to keep asking questions, keep demanding answers, even if those answers are hard to come by. The truth is, we're never going to know everything that goes on inside these buildings. They're built to keep us out, to keep their things hidden. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe there are things we're better off not knowing, but at the same time, we can't let ourselves become complacent. We can't just accept that it's normal for the government to be watching our every move, for private companies to be collecting our every click and keystroke. We need to remember that privacy is important, that it's something worth fighting for. These buildings are symbols of a surveillance state that's grown too big, too powerful, too intrusive. They're a reminder that there are forces at work behind the scenes, forces that operate without our knowledge or consent. And as long as they stand, they'll continue to serve as a reminder of the cost of convenience, of the price we pay for security. They're there, watching, waiting, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. But that doesn't mean we have to like it. It doesn't mean we have to accept it without question. In the end, these buildings are just structures, concrete, steel, wires, and cables. But what they represent is something much larger, something much more insidious. They're a symbol of the surveillance state, of the power that comes from information, of the control that comes from knowing everything about everyone. Their walls hold whispers of every private moment, every unguarded glance, capturing more than just the skyline. Each floor feels like a layer in a web designed to hold us tight, unseen yet inescapable. And as long as they stand, they'll continue to serve as a reminder that there's always someone watching, always someone listening. They're not going anywhere, and neither is the surveillance state they represent. And that, perhaps, is the most unsettling truth of all. As you walk by these concrete giants, whether in Chicago, New York, or any other city, take a moment to think about what they stand for. Think about the power they represent, the information they hold, the things they keep. They're not just buildings, they're a statement that says, we're here and we're not going anywhere. They're built to endure, to stand tall through storms and time, almost as if they're watching us too. Every window, every camera feels like an eye that never blinks, a presence we can't ignore. And as long as they stand, we need to keep asking questions, keep demanding answers, keep fighting for our right to privacy. Because if we don't, who will? Is this strange building just another government project? Or could it be a hidden shelter for a chosen few in case of disaster? What are they preparing for? And why does it have to be so secretive? Tell us what you think. Is there more to this than meets the eye? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.